I still remember the sound of my father's knuckles on the door that morning. Not a soft, hesitant knock, but 3 deliberate taps that echoed through my apartment. My apartment. The one I'd worked 60-hour weeks to afford, the one with the faded green couch I'd hauled up 3 flights of stairs by myself because I couldn't afford movers. The one with the small balcony where I'd planted herbs in recycled coffee cans, determined to create something beautiful in a space that was finally truly mine. "Coming!" I called, setting my coffee mug down on the kitchen counter. It was Saturday, and I wasn't expecting anyone. My hair was still damp from the shower, and I was wearing my favorite oversized sweater. The soft grey one with a small coffee stain near the hem that I could never quite remove. When I opened the door, my father stood there with my younger sister Melissa behind him. His face wore that expression I knew too well, stern determination with a practiced smile that never reached his eyes. My stomach immediately tightened. We hadn't spoken in nearly 6 months, not since the argument at Thanksgiving when he'd criticized my decision to switch careers at 32. "Dad, Melissa." "What are you doing here?" I asked, genuinely confused. My sister gave me a small, apologetic smile, but she didn't meet my eyes. That's when I noticed the manila folder in my father's hand, gripped so tightly his knuckles were white. "Hello, Emma," he said, his voice carrying that familiar authoritative tone he'd used throughout my childhood. "We need to talk. May we come in?" I hesitated for a moment before stepping aside. "Sure, come in. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water?" "This won't take long," my father replied, making his way directly to my living room. Melissa followed him silently, her shoulders hunched forward slightly, as if she were trying to make herself smaller. My apartment wasn't large, but I'd made it mine. Family photos on the wall, though none with my father in them. Books stacked on every surface. The throw blanket my grandmother had crocheted draped over the arm of the couch. My father surveyed it all with a critical eye before sitting down, placing the folder on the coffee table between us. "You've done well with the place," he said, but it sounded like an observation rather than a compliment. "Always had an eye for making things look nice, even with limited resources." I sat across from him, ignoring the backhanded compliment. "What's this about, Dad? It's been months since we've talked." My father cleared his throat and leaned forward. "It's about this apartment, Emma." Something cold settled in my chest. "What about my apartment?" "Well," he said, opening the folder, "that's actually what we need to discuss." He pulled out several papers, official-looking documents with stamps and signatures. "You see, there's been a misunderstanding about the ownership situation." I stared at him, disbelief already building. Misunderstanding? I bought this apartment 2 years ago. The mortgage is in my name. I make every payment. My father nodded as if I were a student who had only partially grasped a concept. "Yes, you've been making the payments, but you need to understand the bigger picture." Melissa shifted uncomfortably beside him, but remained silent, picking at a loose thread on her sleeve. "What bigger picture? I saved for years for the down payment. I worked overtime for months to qualify for the loan. There is no bigger picture. This is my home." My father slid one of the documents across the table toward me. "This is a family investment agreement drawn up 5 years ago. Do you remember when we discussed potential family investments during that Christmas gathering at Lake Tahoe?" I shook my head slowly. "No, I don't remember any formal discussion about—" "It was when you were between jobs," he continued as if I hadn't spoken. "We talked about how the family should pool resources for property investments. Everyone agreed it was a good idea." "Dad, that was a casual conversation over dinner. No one signed anything, and that was before I even thought about buying this place." He tapped another document. "This one outlines the family trust's interest in all major property acquisitions by family members." My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. What family trust? I never agreed to any trust. It was established when you were younger. Your grandfather started it. All family property falls under its umbrella. He pulled out another document. And finally, this affidavit confirms that funds from family accounts were used as seed money for your career development, with the understanding that any major assets acquired would be considered family investments. I sat very still, trying to process his words. The coffee in my stomach felt like acid. "Are you saying that you think you own part of my apartment?" He smiled then, a smile that didn't contain a trace of warmth. "Not just part, Emma. The trust has primary ownership. You've essentially been maintaining it for the family." "That's absurd," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I paid for this myself. Every penny. With money you earned from the education we financed," he countered, "with connections we provided, with the foundation we built for you." I looked at my sister, who was now staring at the floor. "Melissa, did you know about this?" She glanced up briefly, her expression pained. "Dad explained it to me last week. He says it's all legal." My father nodded, satisfied with her response. "It's all perfectly legitimate. The documentation is clear." "Documentation I never saw or signed," I said, my voice stronger now. "Your signature wasn't necessary. As beneficiaries of the family trust, certain conditions are automatically applied." I stood up, unable to sit still any longer. "This is ridiculous. I bought this apartment with my own money. I have the mortgage documents, the down payment receipts, which is why we're here having this conversation," my father interrupted, his tone maddeningly patient. "To clear up this misconception before it becomes problematic." "Problematic for whom?" I demanded. He straightened the papers, tapping them on the table to align them perfectly. "Your cousin Thomas is moving back to the city next month for his new position at the firm. The family has decided this would be an ideal location for him. Close to downtown, good neighborhood." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "You want me to give up my apartment for Thomas?" "It's not about giving up anything," my father said. "It's about recognizing the reality of the situation. The apartment belongs to the family trust. You've been maintaining it and we appreciate that, but now it's needed for another purpose." I crossed my arms tightly across my chest, feeling suddenly cold despite the warm spring day. "And where am I supposed to live?" "We've thought of that," he said, pulling out yet another document. "There's a nice one-bedroom available in the Highland Apartments across town. The trust will facilitate the transfer. It's a lateral move, really." I almost laughed. The Highland Apartments were in a completely different neighborhood, far from my work, my friends, the life I'd built. And they were notoriously overpriced for what they offered. "This is my home," I said firmly. "I'm not moving." My father's expression hardened slightly. "Emma, I understand you've developed an attachment to this place, but this isn't about emotions. It's about what's best for the family as a whole." "What's best for the family?" I repeated incredulously. "Or what's best for Thomas?" "Your cousin has earned this opportunity," my father said stiffly. "His new position is crucial for expanding the family's business interests." "And what about my position? My life? My home?" My father sighed, as if I were being deliberately difficult. "This is exactly why we need these structures in place, Emma. You're thinking individually rather than considering the collective benefit." I stared at him, seeing with painful clarity the dynamic that had shaped my entire life. My needs, my dreams, always secondary to the greater good, as defined by my father. Melissa finally spoke up, her voice small. "Emma, it's not as bad as it sounds. The Highland place is nice. I went with Dad to see it yesterday." I turned to her, betrayal burning in my chest. "You went to see my replacement apartment without even telling me this was happening." She looked away quickly, and I knew she regretted speaking at all. My father stood, gathering the documents. "We'll give you some time to process this, of course. The transfer wouldn't happen for another 4 weeks, so you have time to pack. I'm not going anywhere, I said again, my voice steadier than I felt. He looked at me then, and for the first time, I saw a flash of genuine emotion, irritation breaking through his controlled facade. Emma, don't make this difficult. The documentation is clear. The legal standing is solid. Show me where I agreed to any of this, I challenged. Your participation in the family structure is your agreement, he said dismissively. Now I have another appointment, but I'll leave these copies for you to review. He placed the folder on the table. We can discuss the logistics next week. As they moved toward the door, my father turned back. Oh, and Emma, we'll need a set of keys for the assessment team to evaluate any updates needed before Thomas moves in. I stood frozen, watching as my sister followed him out, throwing one apologetic glance over her shoulder before the door closed behind them. For several minutes, I didn't move. I stared at the manila folder on my coffee table, feeling as if a bomb had been placed in my living room, in my apartment that I had worked so hard to afford. I finally picked up the folder with shaking hands and began reading the documents more carefully. The language was dense, filled with legal terminology that seemed designed to confuse and intimidate. References to a family trust I'd never been consulted about. Clauses about shared assets and family investment priorities. And yes, there was my name, listed as a beneficiary of a trust I'd never knowingly participated in. But something caught my eye on the third page, a signature that was supposedly mine, dated 3 years ago. I stared at it in shock. It looked similar to my signature, but with subtle differences that only I would recognize. Someone had signed my name. My phone buzzed with a text. It was Melissa. I'm sorry about this. Dad says it's for the best. Please don't fight it. You know how he gets. I didn't respond. Instead, I sat down at my small desk and opened my laptop. I pulled up my banking records, my mortgage documents, the original paperwork from the purchase of the apartment. Everything was in my name alone. Every payment had come from my personal account. Then I searched my email for any mention of a family trust. Nothing. Not a single reference in years of correspondence. I remembered the day I closed on this apartment. How proud I'd felt signing those papers, how my father had declined my invitation to come with me, saying he was too busy with more significant matters. How I'd stood alone in these empty rooms afterward, tears of accomplishment streaming down my face as I imagined building a life here. My phone rang. It was my father. I let it go to voicemail. Emma, his recorded voice said, I know this is a lot to take in, but it's important that you approach this maturely. The family has always supported you, and now it's time for you to support the family's goals. Call me when you're ready to discuss the transition details rationally. I deleted the message and stared out the window at the city I loved, the view I'd chosen when I selected this apartment. The reality of what was happening began to sink in fully. My father wasn't just trying to take my home, he was trying to erase my independence, my accomplishment, my very sense of self. The familiar feeling crept in, that urge to acquiesce, to keep the peace, to be the good daughter who didn't cause problems. It was the pattern of my entire life with him, but as I looked around at the space I'd created for myself, something shifted inside me. Not this time, not my home. I picked up my phone and made a call, but not to my father. Instead, I dialed the number of someone I hadn't spoken to in years, my mother's older brother, Uncle Richard, the black sheep of the family and, more importantly, a real estate attorney. Uncle Rich, I said when he answered, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. I need your help. Your father did what? Uncle Richard's voice crackled through the phone, disbelief clear even through the connection. I took a deep breath. He showed up with documents claiming my apartment belongs to some family trust. He wants me to move out so my cousin Thomas can have it. There was a long pause before Uncle Richard spoke again. "Emma, I've been estranged from your father's side of the family for years, but even I know there is no legitimate family trust that would give him claim to your property." The knot in my stomach loosened slightly. "He had papers, Uncle Rich, documents with what looked like my signature, but I never signed anything." "That's forgery," he said flatly, "plain and simple." I closed my eyes, the word making everything suddenly more real. "I don't understand why he would do this. I mean, I know he's always been controlling, but this is different. Your father has always viewed family as something he owns and directs, not as individuals he respects," Uncle Richard said. There was an old pain in his voice, and I remembered the family rift that had occurred when I was just a child. Something about Uncle Richard defying my grandfather's wishes for his career. "What should I do?" "First, don't give him any keys. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything verbally," he instructed. "Second, gather all your documentation, purchase agreement, mortgage statements, down payment receipts, everything. Third, I want you to come to my office Monday morning, 9 o'clock. Bring everything." "Okay," I said, jotting down notes. "Should I confront him about the forged signature?" "Not yet," Uncle Richard advised. "Let's establish our position first. Your father is counting on you following the same pattern you always have. Initial resistance followed by compliance. He's expecting you to fold." His words stung because they were true. How many times had I stood my ground initially, only to give in to keep the peace? It was the dynamic that had defined our relationship since my mother died when I was 15. My father made the decisions. I eventually accepted them. "I'm not folding this time," I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "Good," Uncle Richard said. "I'll see you Monday." After hanging up, I spent the rest of the day gathering every document related to my apartment purchase. Bank statements showing the source of my down payment, emails with my real estate agent, the mortgage approval letter congratulating me, solely me, on my new home. My phone buzzed repeatedly with texts from both my father and Melissa, but I ignored them. Instead, I made another call to my closest friend, Diane. "He did what?" Diane's outrage was immediate and validating. "Emma, that's insane. He can't just show up and claim your apartment." "Apparently he thinks he can," I said, the reality of the situation still sinking in. "He had documents, Diane, including what looks like my forged signature." "That's illegal," she exclaimed, "like actually criminal." "I know. I'm meeting with my uncle on Monday. He's a real estate attorney." "Good. Don't let your dad bulldoze you on this. This is your home, Em. Your home." After we hung up, I walked through my apartment, running my fingers along the walls I'd painted myself, looking at the small improvements I'd made over the past 2 years. The kitchen backsplash I'd installed with Diane's help, the built-in bookshelf a co-worker had helped me construct, the window seat where I drank my coffee every morning, watching the city wake up. This wasn't just an apartment. It was the physical manifestation of my independence, of the life I'd built for myself, after years of living under my father's control. My phone rang again. My father. This time I answered. "Emma," he said, his voice carrying that false patience I knew too well. "You're not answering my texts." "I've been busy," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "We need to arrange a time for the assessment team to come through." "How about Tuesday morning?" The audacity took my breath away. "No." There was a pause. "No, Dad. No one is coming to assess my apartment. No one is getting keys. This is my home, purchased with my money, and I'm not going anywhere." His sigh was heavy with disappointment. "I thought you might react this way initially. That's why I brought the documentation, to help you understand the situation clearly." "I understand the situation perfectly," I said, "and I've been reviewing those documents. Tell me, Dad, when exactly did I sign that beneficiary agreement? Because I have no memory of it." There was the slightest pause before he answered. "It was during that family gathering 3 years ago. Everyone signed. you must remember. I don't, actually. And it's strange because the signature doesn't quite match mine, especially the way I loop my E. Silence. Then, Emma, I'm trying to make this transition as smooth as possible for everyone. Don't make it difficult. I'm not the one making things difficult, I said. I'm simply refusing to be displaced from my own home based on documents I never signed. We can discuss the authenticity of signatures if you insist, my father said, his voice hardening. But consider what you're doing. Thomas needs this location for his new position. The family has invested considerably in his career trajectory. And what about my career trajectory, my life, my home? Sometimes we have to make sacrifices for the greater good, he said, as if explaining something to a child. Whose greater good, Dad? Because it's never been mine. I could almost hear him straightening in his chair, adjusting his tie, his typical response when challenged. I see you're not in a reasonable frame of mind right now. We'll talk tomorrow when you've had time to process everything. I won't be changing my mind, I said firmly. We'll see, he replied and hung up. Sunday passed in a blur of anxiety and determination. I made copies of all my documentation. I researched property law online. I ignored more texts from Melissa asking me to just talk to Dad and not make things worse. Monday morning, I dressed carefully in a navy blue pantsuit, an outfit that always made me feel more confident, and headed to Uncle Richard's office, my file of documents tucked securely in my bag. His office was in a converted brownstone downtown, warm and inviting despite the serious nature of the legal work conducted there. Uncle Richard greeted me with a hug, something my father never did. You look just like your mother, he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. She would be proud of the woman you've become. Those simple words nearly broke me. My mother had been gone for 17 years, but the absence still ached. She had been my buffer against my father's controlling nature, my champion when he tried to dictate my choices. Thank you, I managed, blinking back unexpected tears. That means a lot. In his office, I spread out all my documentation on his desk. Uncle Richard examined each piece carefully, occasionally making notes or asking questions about specific details. This is all very straightforward, he said finally. You purchased this property independently. There's no legitimate claim from any family trust here. He picked up the copies of the documents my father had left. These, on the other hand, are concerning. This signature is clearly not yours, and this supposed trust documentation has several legal deficiencies. So, what do we do? I asked. Uncle Richard leaned back in his chair. We have several options. The simplest would be a cease and desist letter, making it clear that any claim on your property is baseless and will be vigorously contested. Will that be enough? He smiled grimly. For most people, yes. For your father? Probably not. He's likely counting on your emotional compliance rather than legal standing. What else can we do? We can file a preliminary injunction if he attempts to take any actual steps toward claiming your property. And if that forged signature is indeed his work, there are potential criminal implications. I winced at the word criminal. Despite everything, the thought of legal action against my own father was painful. Uncle Richard must have noticed my reaction. Emma, what your father is doing isn't just controlling, it's potentially criminal. Forgery is serious, and using that forgery to try to take your home is even more serious. I know, I said quietly. It's just, he's still my father. Yes, he is, Uncle Richard acknowledged, and that's why this is so difficult. But ask yourself this, if he were anyone else, anyone at all, would you hesitate to protect yourself? The question landed like a stone. He was right. If anyone else had tried to take my home through forged documents, I wouldn't hesitate to take legal action. Let's start with the cease and desist, I decided, and prepare for whatever comes next. Uncle Richard nodded approvingly. I'll draft it today. In the meantime, document everything. Any communication with your father or sister about this matter, save it. Any attempts to access your apartment, record it. I left his office feeling stronger than when I'd arrived. For the first time since my father had shown up at my door, I felt like I had solid ground beneath my feet. This was my home. I had earned it, and I would fight for it. Back at my apartment, I found a voice message from Melissa waiting on my phone. Emma, please call me back. Dad is really upset that you're not cooperating. He says things could get complicated if you keep refusing to discuss the transition. I don't understand why you're being so stubborn about this. The Highland place is perfectly nice, and it would really help Thomas. Call me back, okay? I deleted the message without returning the call. Instead, I sent a text. Melissa, I love you, but this isn't about being stubborn. This is my home, purchased with my money. Dad's documents are fraudulent. I'm not discussing any transition because there isn't going to be one. Her response came quickly. You're making this a bigger deal than it needs to be. Just talk to Dad. I didn't reply. There was nothing more to say. The pattern was so familiar, my father deciding what should happen, Melissa acting as his messenger and facilitator, me expected to fall in line. But not this time. Tuesday morning, I was at my desk working from home when my doorbell rang. I checked the security camera I'd installed after buying the apartment. It was my father, alone this time. I buzzed him up, steeling myself for the confrontation. When I opened the door, he stood there looking perfectly composed in his tailored suit, as if our last conversation had never happened. Emma, he said with a nod, may I come in? I stepped aside, letting him enter. I have a meeting in 30 minutes, so this will need to be brief. It won't take long, he assured me, making his way to the living room. He sat down without waiting to be invited and placed a new folder on the coffee table. I've brought revised documentation to address your concerns. I remained standing. What concerns would those be? About your signature, he said smoothly. I understand you don't recall signing the beneficiary agreement. This version doesn't require your signature at all. It relies solely on the original trust documents established by your grandfather. I stared at him, incredulous at his audacity. Documents I've never seen for a trust I've never been consulted about. He waved a dismissive hand. The trust was established when you were a minor. Your consent wasn't required then, and your acknowledgement isn't necessary now. Dad, I said, keeping my voice steady, I need to be very clear about something. This apartment is mine. I purchased it with my own money. There is no family trust with a legitimate claim to it. I will not be moving out for Thomas or anyone else. My father's expression hardened. You've always been stubborn, Emma, just like your mother, unable to see the bigger picture. The comparison to my mother was meant to sting, I knew. My father had always framed her independence as a character flaw rather than a strength. I see the picture very clearly, I replied. You're trying to take something that doesn't belong to you. He leaned forward, his voice dropping slightly. You're being naive. Family resources have always supported you. Your education, your first car, the connections that got you your job, all facilitated by family. My education was paid for with the college fund Mum set up before she died, I corrected him. The car was a gift from you on my 16th birthday. A gift, not a loan with hidden strings. And my job, I got that on my own merits, through my own hard work. Nothing is that simple, Emma. We're all connected, interdependent. The family supports individuals and individuals support the family. That's how it works. That's how you want it to work, I countered. That's how you maintain control. He sighed heavily, as if I were being deliberately obtuse. This isn't about control, it's about allocation of resources. Thomas needs this location. The Highland apartment would be perfectly adequate for your needs. My needs? I echoed. Like my need for housing security, my need to not have my home taken from me based on fraudulent documents? My father's eyes narrowed slightly at the word fraudulent. Be careful about making accusations, Emma. It's not an accusation if it's true, I said. I never signed that document. The signature isn't mine. He stood up abruptly. I can see this conversation isn't productive. I'd hoped we could handle this as a family, but if you insist on being difficult, we may need to explore other avenues. What other avenues? I asked. Legal ones, he said coldly. The trust has resources you don't. You're threatening to sue me for my own apartment? I couldn't keep the disbelief from my voice. I'm suggesting that formal proceedings might be necessary if you continue to be uncooperative. He picked up the folder. Think about this carefully, Emma. A protracted legal battle would be costly and unnecessary. The Highland apartment is a reasonable alternative. As he moved toward the door, he paused. Oh, and Emma, Thomas will be expecting to move in by the end of the month. I suggest you start packing. After he left, I stood in my living room, shaking with a mixture of anger and disbelief. My father was actually threatening legal action to take my home, based on documents I'd never seen, for a trust I'd never been consulted about. I called Uncle Richard immediately and relayed the conversation. He's bluffing, Uncle Richard said confidently. He has no legal standing. The cease and desist letter will be delivered to him today. That should make our position clear. What if he really does sue? I asked, the worry creeping into my voice. Then we countersue for the forgery and attempted property theft, Uncle Richard replied. But I doubt it will come to that. Your father relies on intimidation, not actual legal process. Once he realizes you have solid legal representation and aren't backing down, he'll likely change tactics. What kind of tactics? Emotional ones, Uncle Richard said grimly. Pressure from family members, guilt, manipulation, the tools he's always used. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Melissa. Dad just told me what happened. Why are you making this so difficult? He says you're threatening legal action now. Emma, think about what you're doing to the family. I showed the text to Uncle Richard, who was still on the phone. Right on schedule, he said. Remember, Emma, you're not the one threatening the family unity here. Your father is by trying to take your home. After we hung up, I typed a response to Melissa. I'm not threatening legal action. I'm defending myself against Dad's attempt to take my apartment based on fraudulent documents. If you want to talk about this reasonably, I'm here, but I won't be guilted into giving up my home. She didn't respond, and I didn't expect her to. Melissa had always aligned herself with my father, the path of least resistance. That evening, I received an email notification that a certified letter had been delivered to my father's address, Uncle Richard's cease and desist letter. I expected an immediate angry call or text, but there was nothing, just silence. The silence continued the next day and the day after that. No calls from my father, no texts from Melissa, just a strange, unsettling quiet that felt more ominous than any confrontation. On Friday, I received an email from a name I didn't recognize with the subject line, Re Family Trust Matter. I almost deleted it thinking it was spam, but something made me open it. Ms. Walker, my name is James Harrington, legal counsel for the Walker Family Trust. I'm reaching out regarding the disputed property at 742 Westbrook Avenue. We've received communication from Richard Bennett claiming to represent you in this matter. I would like to arrange a meeting to discuss resolution options before proceeding with formal action. Please contact my office at your earliest convenience. A real lawyer. My father had actually hired a real lawyer to try to take my apartment. My hands were shaking as I forwarded the email to Uncle Richard. His response came within minutes. Don't panic. This is actually good news. If they're resorting to legal channels, it means they know they can't intimidate you directly. And any legitimate attorney will quickly recognize the weakness of their position once we present our documentation. Forward any further communication to me and don't respond directly. I tried to take comfort in his confidence, but the reality of the situation was sinking in. This wasn't just an empty threat or a manipulative tactic anymore. My father was actually proceeding with an attempt to legally claim my home. That night I couldn't sleep. I paced through my apartment looking at everything I stood to lose. Not just the physical space, but what it represented. My independence, my achievement, my boundaries. In the darkness of my bedroom, I remembered something my mother had told me when I was 13, during one of her increasingly frequent disagreements with my father. Emma, there's a difference between respect and obedience. Your father confuses the two. Never let anyone use your respect against you to demand your obedience. I hadn't fully understood what she meant then. Now, standing in the apartment I'd earned through my own hard work, I did. My father had always expected obedience under the guise of respect. Family loyalty, family priorities, family needs, all code for his control, his priorities, his needs. As dawn broke, casting a soft light across my bedroom, I made a decision. I wouldn't just defend my home, I would use this moment to finally, completely break the pattern of compliance that had defined my relationship with my father for too long. "You were just keeping it for us," he had said about my apartment. No, I wasn't keeping it for anyone but myself. And I was done keeping the peace at the expense of my own boundaries. Monday morning arrived with unexpected clarity after a weekend of reflection. I walked into my office with purpose, requesting an urgent meeting with my boss. "Angela, I need to take some personal days," I explained once seated in her office. "I'm dealing with a family situation that requires my full attention." She looked concerned. "Everything okay, Emma?" "It will be," I said with newfound resolve. "I just need time to handle it properly." Angela nodded. "Take what you need. Your projects are ahead of schedule anyway." I thanked her and returned to my desk to tie up loose ends before heading to Uncle Richard's office. He greeted me with a grim smile. "I've reviewed the correspondence from this Harrington fellow," he said, gesturing for me to sit. "He's with Westfield and Associates, respectable firm, but known for representing old money families." "What's our next step?" I asked. "I've requested a formal meeting, and I've prepared this." He slid a document across the desk. "It's a comprehensive response to their claim, with all your ownership documentation attached, plus a counter-notification regarding the forged signature." I scanned the document, impressed by its thoroughness. "When's the meeting?" "Tomorrow at 11, their office." Uncle Richard leaned forward. "Emma, there's something else we should discuss. Your father's not just trying to take your apartment. He's trying to establish a precedent of control." "What do you mean? If he succeeds with this claim, what's to stop him from claiming other assets, your investments, future property? This is about establishing that you're not truly independent." His words crystallized something I'd felt but couldn't articulate. "So what do? We don't just defend, we counterattack." He pulled out another document. "I've drafted a formal complaint to be filed if necessary, alleging forgery and fraudulent misrepresentation. It would name your father personally, not just the supposed trust." I stared at the document, understanding the implications. "You're suggesting we threaten criminal charges?" "I'm suggesting we make it clear we're prepared to pursue all legal remedies," he corrected. "Your father is counting on your reluctance to escalate this into a true legal battle." That night, alone in my apartment, I received a text from Melissa. "Dad told me about the lawyer. Are you really threatening to sue him? This is getting out of control, Emma." I responded with simple truth. "I'm defending my home. Dad is the one who hired a lawyer first. He's just protecting family interests. came her predictable reply. "My apartment isn't a family interest. It's my property," I wrote back, then added, "Melissa, have you ever questioned why Dad always gets to decide what's best for everyone?" Her response was delayed. "That's not fair. He's always supported us. Support shouldn't come with hidden conditions," I typed, then set my phone aside, knowing further discussion was pointless. The next morning I dressed in my most professional outfit, a charcoal grey suit with a silk blouse, and met Uncle Richard outside Westfield and Associates. The firm occupied the top floor of a downtown high-rise, its reception area screaming old money with dark wood paneling and oil paintings of stern-faced men. James Harrington greeted us with practiced cordiality, leading us to a conference room where my father already sat alongside another attorney. No Melissa this time. "Ms. Walker, Mr. Bennett?" Harrington nodded. "This is Gerald Fowler, trust specialist." My father didn't look at me directly, focusing instead on arranging papers before him. Harrington began with practiced precision. "We're here to discuss the Walker Family Trust's claim to property at 742 Westbrook Avenue." Uncle Richard's response was equally measured. "We're here to categorically reject that claim and address the fraudulent documentation it's based on." My father's head snapped up at the word fraudulent. "That's a serious allegation," Harrington said, frowning. "Indeed it is," Uncle Richard agreed, opening his folder. "We have Emma's actual signature samples here, alongside the forged signature on your trust document." He slid papers across the table. "Even a cursory examination shows the discrepancy." Fowler, the trust specialist, examined the signatures with a deepening frown. "James, a word," he murmured, and the two attorneys stepped outside. Left alone with my father, I finally met his eyes directly. "Why are you doing this? You wouldn't understand," he said stiffly. "This is about something bigger than just one apartment." "No, it's about control," I said quietly. "It always has been." He started to respond, but fell silent as the lawyers returned. Harrington's demeanor had subtly shifted. "Mr. Walker," he addressed my father, "there are some concerning inconsistencies in the documentation you provided." My father straightened. "The trust's claim is valid regardless of any administrative oversights." "Forgery isn't an administrative oversight," Uncle Richard interjected. "It's a criminal offense." Harrington cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should discuss settlement options." Uncle Richard smiled slightly. "We're open to a simple resolution, full acknowledgement that the apartment belongs solely to Emma, plus written retraction of all claims, and we can avoid further legal proceedings." My father's face flushed. "This is absurd. I won't be threatened in this manner." "It's not a threat," I said calmly. "It's a boundary." The word hung in the air between us, a declaration of independence more powerful than any legal document. Harrington looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Mr. Walker, given the documentation Ms. Walker has provided, I recommend we consider their terms." My father stood abruptly. "This meeting is over. I'll speak with you privately, James." As they left, Uncle Richard turned to me with a smile. "That went exactly as I expected. What happens now?" "They'll back down," he said confidently. "Harrington's no fool. He sees the forgery issue and wants no part of it." Later that day, I received an email from Harrington. "After consultation with our client, we are preparing a formal withdrawal of claims regarding the property at 742 Westbrook Avenue." I forwarded it to Uncle Richard, who responded with a single word: "Victory." But I knew it wasn't over. My father wouldn't simply accept defeat. The legal battle might be won, but the war for true independence had just begun. That evening, my doorbell rang. I checked the security camera. It was my father alone. I briefly considered not answering, but decided this confrontation was inevitable. When I opened the door, He looked diminished somehow. His usual commanding presence faltered. "May I come in?" he asked, his voice lacking its usual authority. I stepped aside silently, letting him enter the apartment he had tried to claim as his own. "You were keeping it for us," he had said. But I knew now, with absolute certainty, that I wasn't keeping my home or myself for anyone but me. My father stood in my living room, surveying it as if seeing it for the first time, not as a property to acquire, but as an extension of my identity. "Your lawyer was thorough," he finally said. "Uncle Richard is very good at what he does," I replied neutrally. He nodded, still not meeting my eyes. "The trust is withdrawing its claim." "I know. I received the email." An uncomfortable silence stretched between us, filled with unspoken accusations and justifications. "You've changed," he finally said. "You used to understand the importance of family unity." "I still understand family importance," I countered, "but not at the expense of my autonomy." He sighed, finally looking directly at me. "Emma, everything I've done has been to strengthen our family position. The apartment's location is perfect for Thomas's new role at the firm. It was a practical decision made without consulting me about my own home," I pointed out, "and using a forged signature to justify it." He flinched slightly at the direct accusation. "Administrative errors happen." "That wasn't an error. Someone signed my name." He looked away again. "The document needed your signature to proceed." The admission, however indirect, stunned me. "So you just forged it? Do you realize that's a crime?" "It was a formality," he said dismissively. "The trust's claim was always the primary legal foundation." I shook my head, amazed at his ability to rationalize dishonesty. "A foundation built on lies." "Built on family," he corrected sharply. "Everything I've done, everything, has been to secure our family's position. Your mother never understood that. I'd hoped you would." "What you call family position, I call control," I said quietly. "And I'm done with it." His expression hardened. "So you'll damage family relationships over an apartment? You damaged our relationship when you tried to take my home through fraudulent means," I replied. "This isn't about the apartment anymore. It's about respect." "Respect?" He nearly spat the word. "I've spent your entire life ensuring you had every advantage, every opportunity, and holding them over my head as leverage," I interrupted. "That's not support, Dad. It's manipulation." He fell silent, his jaw working as he processed my words. I continued, finding strength in finally speaking truth. "I appreciate the genuine opportunities you've provided, but I won't accept them as chains." "Chains?" he repeated, his voice hollow. "That's how you see family obligation?" "I see a difference between mutual support and forced compliance," I said. "You've never recognized that distinction." He moved toward the window, looking out at the city view. "Your mother said something similar once." The comparison surprised me. My father rarely mentioned my mother, especially not in ways that suggested she might have been right about anything. "She was right," I said softly. He turned back to me, his expression unreadable. "Perhaps in some ways, but family legacy matters, Emma. Individual desires sometimes need to yield to collective benefit." "Not when it comes to my home," I stated firmly. "Not when it means erasing my achievement to benefit someone else's. Thomas deserves opportunities based on his own merit," I interrupted. "Not my apartment." My father fell silent again, studying me with new eyes. I stood straighter under his gaze, no longer the compliant daughter eager for approval. "You've made your position clear," he finally said. "The trust has withdrawn its claim. The matter is closed." "The legal matter is closed," I corrected. "But we need to be clear about boundaries going forward." He raised an eyebrow. "Boundaries?" "Yes. My home, My career, my choices, they're mine. I welcome family support, but not family control. He absorbed this for a moment before nodding stiffly. I see. Do you? I challenged. Because this pattern can't continue. What pattern would that be? You deciding what's best for everyone without consultation. Using family resources as leverage for compliance. Treating adult children like assets to be managed rather than individuals to be respected. My directness clearly unsettled him. My father was accustomed to deference, not confrontation. You've made your feelings abundantly clear, he said coldly. Is there anything else? I took a deep breath. Yes. I want to know why. Why go to these lengths? Why risk our relationship over an apartment? For a moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then something shifted in his expression, a crack in the armor of authority he'd worn my entire life. Because I'm losing control, he said quietly. Your sister's engagement to someone outside our circle. Cousins moving away. The family business facing new challenges. Everything I've built is dispersing. The unexpected vulnerability in his admission caught me off guard. That doesn't justify taking my home, I said, but gently now. No, he agreed, surprising me further. It doesn't. He moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. The withdrawal documents will be finalized tomorrow. Your uncle will receive copies. Thank you, I said, not knowing what else to add. He turned back, his expression inscrutable. Your mother would be proud of you, Emma. She always valued independence. With that, he left, closing the door quietly behind him. I stood motionless in my living room, processing what had just happened. My father had admitted defeat, however reluctantly. More importantly, he had glimpsed, perhaps for the first time, that I was truly my own person. That night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, looking out at the city lights. My phone buzzed with a text from Melissa. Dad told me what happened. Are you okay? I smiled slightly at the question. Not how could you do this to the family, but genuine concern for me. Perhaps boundaries were contagious. I'm better than okay, I replied. I'm home. The next morning, I woke to an email from Uncle Richard with the formal withdrawal documents attached. Signed and notarized, his message read. Congratulations, Emma. Your home is officially and indisputably yours again. I printed the document, holding the physical proof in my hands, but the paper merely confirmed what I already knew. This apartment had always been mine. What had changed was my willingness to defend it, to stand firm against even family pressure. I placed the document in my safe, alongside the original deed and mortgage papers. Then I made coffee and took it to my window seat, watching the morning light spread across my city view. My father had brought documents to claim the apartment I paid for, saying, "You were keeping it for us." He never knew what I did that day, the day I finally stood my ground, not just for my apartment, but for myself. Justice doesn't scream. It arrives in silence, in the quiet certainty that you deserve to claim your own space in the world, and no one can take that from you unless you let them.